What if the Yorha units were heroic spirits? Berserker Edition.
Let's see what you got.
Yorha's number 2. True name, A2. She can take far more damage than her counterpart, 2B, and despite being summoned as a Berserker, she's actually closer to a Saber. Her Noble Phantasm is where her Berserker status comes in, a self-anti-unit type, B mode. She'll shut off her pain tolerance, all her stats will skyrocket. She hit hard before, she hits even harder now. What if Ardbert was a heroic spirit?
It's a wonder you didn't come sooner, what with the primal and all. Lost a step, have we?
Known as the Hero of the First, or the Warrior of Darkness, he'd be summoned as... I don't know where to put him. He's too slow to be a Lancer. I don't see him as Berserker material. I'm gonna say he's a Saber. Does he carry a sword? No. Does Fate's class system make sense? Also, no. Much like the Warrior of Light, he possessed the skill Heart of Ember. As long as a weapon is in his hand, he has quite the offensive advantage. He'd possess another skill called Shadowbringer. Dark magic doesn't hurt him. His Noble Phantasm is an anti-army type. His axe, Bravura Atma. Because Young Justice has officially returned, Season 4 is now on HBO Max. What if Artemis was a heroic spirit?
Ow!
Says the guy who took his name from an 80s mullet rock band.
Known simply as Tigress, she'd be summoned as an archer. She'd possess 2 anti-unit Noble Phantasms. The first is a glamour charm that hides her physical appearance, so it'll be virtually impossible to decipher her true identity. And her second Noble Phantasm, Maneuver 7, the perfect maneuver to defeat any enemy. What if Beto was a heroic spirit?
If you ever want to trade tactics, I'm always ready.
She'd be known as the Impending Storm, Leo is Fearless, or the Captain of the Crux, and be summoned as a rider. She's always trading tactics with Francis Drake, and her reputation in Liyue precedes her. Being a very well-rounded servant, she'd have some qualities of a Saber. She'd possess 2 Noble Phantasms, the first an anti-army type, her fleet, the Crux, and the second can range from an anti-unit to an anti-fortress, Tidecaller. I'll be starting a new series that's totally not ripped off from Final Fantasy Guide. Nope, not at all. Anywho, have you ever wondered what some characters would be like if they were heroic spirits? What if Cecil Harvey was a heroic spirit? He would be known throughout history as the half-Lunarian hero. He could be summoned as either a Lancer or a caster. He would possess a skill called Moonlit Shadow that would allow him to charge mana as long as he's in the light of the moon. But depending on if the moon is full or new, this can reveal his other class, and thus his true name. His Noble Phantasm would be a self-anti-unit type, and to unleash it he would chant its incantation, Lunaria, the moon leads me. This would allow him to shift back and forth from his classes for a brief period as well as increase his speed and attack power. But switching to the other class will reveal his true name. What if Ciri was a heroic spirit?
A witcher can forget to eat, to drink, to breathe even. But a witcher never ever forgets to care for his blade.
She'd be known as Citadel of Sintra, the She-Witcher, the Last Witcher, or the Lion Cup of Sintra, and could be summoned as either a Saber or a Caster. She could be a candidate for Grand Servant, for both classes. Due to having Elder Blood, she has a natural ability for using space and time magic. She'd possess an anti-unit Noble Phantasm, Zirael, a silver sword that cuts through mana like butter. But then there's also her anti-world Noble Phantasm, but that's a topic for another day. He was gonna come up eventually. Yeah, what if Cloud Strife was a heroic spirit? Depending on which era you summon him from, he could either be summoned as a Saber or as a Ruler. Cloud as a Saber would also be called the Ex-Soldier, and possess a skill called Soldier's Perception, which, given enough time and enough damage taken, he can charge mana as well as discern an opponent's true name. His Noble Phantasm would be an anti-unit type. He'd funnel mana through the sword, so he wouldn't have to chant an incantation. He would unleash a barrage of terrible strikes that would damage his enemy as well as curse them when the assault is done. And if the Phantasm wouldn't destroy them, then the curse would. The Ruler Edition coming soon. What if Death was a heroic spirit?
I have an offer in mind.
He'd be known as the Grim Reaper, the Pale One, the Rider of the Pale Horse, the Last of the Nephilim.
One eternity later.
The Leader of the Horsemen, the Harvester of Souls. Did I get them all? Or the End of All Things. Jeez, this man has so many titles. Could fit in virtually every class, but for the sake of variety, let's say he's a Lancer. If you summon Death, you win. He so much as glances in your general direction, you're finished. But can he beat Gilgamesh? Gil is a heroic spirit, which means at some point Gil died. So yes, he can. He'd possess a skill called Reaper's Burden. For every soul that dies, which is a lot more than you think it is, he'll charge mana. A lot of mana. His Scythe Harvester is technically 2 Noble Phantasms, an anti-army type and an anti-unit type. RIP to anyone who crosses blades with this man. What if Jacob and Evie Fry were heroic spirits? Similar to Bonnie and Reed, they'd be summoned together as assassins. They'd be known as London's finest, or the unstoppable Fry twins, and possess the normal Brotherhood skills, Hassan's influence, eagle vision, and though they'd be a pair of assassins, they would have vastly different skill sets. Jacob would be closer to a berserker, with strong leadership skills. His noble phantasm would be an anti-unit type, the Rooks. He'll create a reality marble of the back alleys of London, and summon his old gang. Evie would be closer to a saber, and her noble phantasm would also be anti-unit, the sword of the Fry family. As she strikes with it, the blades inside will extend at the exact moment to inflict the most damage. What if Irelia was a heroic spirit?
We are sharpest where we break!
She'd be known as the Defiant Blade, or the Daughter of the First Light, and be summoned as an archer. She'd possess a skill called Protection of Oma. Her blades would defend her from any projectile and cover any blind spot she may have. Her noble phantasm would be an anti-unit type. She would chant the incantation.
We dance to the drums of war, and all our hearts beat as one!
A reality marble would form around them. They'd be in a barren land under a single tree, sakura petals flowing in the wind, and she'll launch her blades at her opponent. Because Bridge of Spirits is releasing tomorrow, what if Kana was a heroic spirit?
Hi.
She'd be known as the Spirit Guide, the Wayfarer, or the Sage of the Rot, and be summoned as a caster. She'd possess a skill called Wayfaring Voices. The voices of the deceased will guide and assist her in battle. Her noble phantasm would be an anti-army type, the Army of Rot. She'll create a reality marble of the forest, and summon an army of these little guys. Careful, they're a lot more dangerous than they look. What if Mona was a heroic spirit? Known as Mondstadt's ass. Wait, what was that? Oh! Mondstadt's astrologist, she'd be summoned as a caster. She'd possess a skill called Ripple of Fate. She can disrupt the flow of mana from master to servant. She'd possess another skill called Reflection Pool. Only around water's reflection, she can actually create a mirror image of her opponent, and command it like her own familiar. Her noble phantasm would be an anti-army type, Stellaris Phantasm. She'll trap her target in a bubble, hypnotizing them with constellations. And when in this state, a master won't be able to give orders to their servant. What if Neku was a heroic spirit? Well, he'd be similar to Anne Bonny and Mary Reed. He and Shiki would be summoned together as a caster.
Losing's not an option!
Being partners, they can act as each other's own servant and master. Neku will possess a skill called Noise Filter. He can filter a servant's location, similar to a ruler, and can hear a master's telepathic link. Shiki would possess a skill called False Self. She can take any amount of damage, but she can only be truly defeated once Mr. Mew is destroyed. They'd possess a skill together called Noise Proximity. The closer they are to each other, the stronger their individual psyches are. Their noble phantasm would be an anti-army type, Noise Cancellation. They'll attack in perfect sync and erase their opponent. What if Neon was a heroic spirit?
Ay, boy.
Codename Sprinter, she'd be summoned as an archer. Much like Jet, she'd be sort of a hybrid between archer and caster. Her skills would be her abilities as a Radiant, control over electricity. Her noble phantasm would be an anti-army type, Overcharge. What if Nier was a heroic spirit? He'd be known as the World Ender, the Shadow Lord, or simply her brother. Could fit in every class, but let's say he's a caster. He's technically similar to Bonnie and Reed. If you summon Nier, you win. Grimoire Vice can act as a passive skill as well as two noble phantasms. Because of that passive skill, Nier will never run out of mana. The first noble phantasm, an anti-army type, the Dark Arts. Weiss has various spells at his disposal. His second noble phantasm is an anti-world type, the Black Scroll. After defeating an enemy, an alter version of his opponent is created and then bound to Nier, but can act independently away from him as well. What if Riven was a heroic spirit? Known as the Broken Blade or the Exiled, she'd be summoned as a saber. The Runic Blade can be a passive skill as well as an anti-army noble phantasm. As Riven inflicts damage, she'll charge mana. That charged mana will slowly start to rebuild the Runic Blade. When the blade is rebuilt, she can let all the energy out at once in one explosive strike, or use the blade shards as a whip. What if Tara Branford was a heroic spirit? She'd be known as the Half-Esper, and be summoned as a caster. She would absolutely be a candidate for Grand Caster. Fight me! She'd possess a skill called Esper Lineage. She is constantly absorbing mana from everything, even other servants, even other masters. Her noble phantasm would be an anti-world type. What if Tifa were a heroic spirit? Ruler Edition. Ruler Tifa would be called the Seventh Heaven's Angel. Though she's not as agile as her Berserker counterpart, she's arguably stronger. She'd possess two noble phantasms. Like Cloud, wrapped around her left arm is the Sinner's Blessing. The ribbon will protect her from any magical damage. Her second noble phantasm would be an anti-army type. Final Heaven. As a bonus, she'd possess a dual noble phantasm with Cloud. Brave Shift. You know, cause I'm still high off the one-shot, it is a great time to be a Bleach fan. What if Toshiro Hitsugaya was a heroic spirit? He'd be known as the captain of Squad 10, and be summoned as a saber. Another candidate for Grand Saber, Hyorimaru can act as a passive skill, as well as a noble phantasm. Because of that passive skill, Toshiro will charge mana from all the water around him, all of the water in the atmosphere. And much like Ichigo, his noble phantasm will change from anti-unit to anti-fortress to anti-world, as he takes or deals more damage. He can activate it by chanting the incantation. Yeah, good luck. What if the Warrior of Light was a heroic spirit? That's actually a title he shares with other heroes, and only he would know his true name. No master would ever get the privilege of knowing the name of one of the heroes of Eorzea. He could fit in virtually every class, but for the sake of time, let's say he's a saber. He'd possess a skill called Heart of Ember. As long as a sword is in his hand, he'll gain an intense stat boost. He'll have another skill called Job Change. Similar to Amiya's Unlimited Blade Works, he can call upon other armor sets to deal with the threaded hand. His noble phantasm will actually change depending on which set of armor he has. But for the sake of time, let's look at this one. An anti-army type. Endwalker. What if Issaria was a heroic spirit? This is as close as you're gonna get to what if I was a heroic spirit. Known universally as a hero of Eorzea, he'd be summoned as an archer or as a lancer. As an archer, Issaria possesses a skill called Blood Charge. He'll drain mana from his opponent and use it as ammunition. He'd possess another skill called Hear, Feel, Think. The other heroes of Eorzea are always with him and always guide him in battle. His noble phantasm would be an anti-army type. Gunmetal Soul. He'll create a barrier that negates all magic. However strong and how long it lasts depends on how much ammo is in the cartridge. He'd possess another skill called Unbroken Circle. If by some random 1 in a million chance he was ordered to fight Y'shtola or Ardbert, he can actually break the contract with his master. Lancer coming soon.